Hi guys, to celebrate the release of the amazing Freshers by Tom Ellen and Lucy Iverson, Chicken House have sponsored me to talk about my favourite bookish memories. I love reading books because I think it's such a sensory thing. You've got the smell of the books, you've got your eyes reading and seeing the pages, and then for me there are lots of memories associated with them, where I was when I was reading them, how I was when I was reading them, how old I was, so many things like that. And a big part of Freshers is about memories, and the main characters in Freshers are at university and they study English literature, and so they do a module about memories and about books that deal with memories, and so I thought it would be a really good thing to talk about in relation to this book. So let's get into the video and I will talk to you about my favourite books and my favourite memories associated with them. So I thought that a good place to start with would be with Freshers. This is Tom Ellen and Lucy Iverson's latest book. Their first one was Lobsters, which I really loved. And this is set in a university, like I said. It follows two main characters, Phoebe and Luke, and they actually went to the same secondary school and sixth form, and they go to university, and I think it's all about the highs and lows of starting in a new place where you don't know anyone, or they know each other but they don't know anyone else. They're starting afresh and they're on their own in the world for the first time, so it's all about that. And I think that Freshers is a really exciting thing to talk about, and I've never seen it talked about in a book before. So the memory I most associate with Freshers is that I think I read it in my last few days at college. If you don't know, I've just finished my first year at college in the UK, which isn't like college in America. It's kind of like a sixth form, the 2 years you do before you go on to university. So I think I was in my last few days. It was really hot. We were having about a 30-degree heat wave in the UK, which is really hot, and everybody kind of shuts down and melts, and it was so hot. And I got sent Freshers in the post. I thought, oh, I'll just read it over the next few days. It came sometime in the morning and I went to college in the afternoon, and I was reading it all day. I was reading it on the train as I went. I was just reading it and I could not put it down. And I think the best thing about Freshers and the best thing about Tom Ellen and Lucy Iverson's writing is that it is so funny. It is hilarious and I just can't stop laughing when I read their books. I don't feel that a lot when I read books. There aren't many books I read when I think this is hilarious, but I know that when I read their books I will laugh out loud. So as I was reading Freshers, I just wanted to read more and more, but I also wanted to get home. College for me is one of those things where I finish for the day, then I can't wait to get home. I don't stick around. But this day the trains were horrifically delayed, and actually I usually hate that, but on this particular day I was super happy because it meant that I got to read Freshers, and I was reading it and I was sat there in the waiting room waiting for my train, and it was about an hour or something delayed, and I was just sat there reading the book and thinking, just 10 minutes more, just be delayed by 10 minutes because I want to get home, but I also really want to read Freshers. And then I was super annoyed because it was standing room only on the train and I couldn't read it, and we were all packed in. There are the seats on one side and the seats on the other side, and then there's a tiny bit where you go in through the door, and I was crammed in there, and I just wanted to get home and finish the last chapter or two. I really did have, I think, about 3 or 4 chapters left, and I couldn't wait to finish it. When I finish a book, when I get to the end, I get super irritable. I can't talk to anyone. I just want everyone to leave me alone, because in that moment the only thing that matters is finishing the book, and I love this book. I'm going to be rereading it lots, and I think it's one that if you're a bit nervous about going to university or not sure about it, I think it can be really reassuring, because even though the experiences of the characters might not line up with how you might be or how you might want to be, there are lots of characters in here that you can relate to, and there's going to be one for sure that you'll fall in love with, even if they're not exactly like you. I really love Freshers, and I think that everybody should read it. My next bookish memory is one associated with The Loneliest Girl in the Universe by Lauren James, which I think is one of the most exciting books in the world. In the universe, it is set in space, and the main character Romy, or as Lauren calls her, Romy, but I can't not call her Romy, that's how I read her name. She is the only surviving crew member on a spaceship which is destined for another planet where they're gonna form another colony because things aren't too good on Earth. So Romy was born in space and she's never known anything different, and it's all about fandom as well as space and being the only one and having to figure things out. And Romy is an amazing character, and Lauren has done an amazing blog post talking about how she wanted to show that weak characters can be strong too, and I think that Romy really encapsulates that. So the memory I most associate with this book is I was going through such a rough patch when I was reading this, and I was in a really bad place. It was my first day out of the house actually, and I'd been slowly trying to build up to being able to function again. That sounds dramatic, but I've done a video talking about my anxiety before, and it was such a hard time in my life where I really had to fight to function again, and The Loneliest Girl in the Universe really helped with that. It's not the themes in the book that meant that I could cope, but how it just meant that I could have an escape. So for me, one of the biggest things was going out on public transport and being around other people. So for me, the best way that I could cope was reading this book, and so I had it on my phone and I was just glued to it the whole time. And when I was reading the book, I was just focusing on the amazing words and how reading them was helping me get out of the house and get through and be around people again. For me, that was the best thing possible, and I needed that distraction. And after I read this, and after having that to fall back on and help me get through it, I could get back again and I could kind of make my way into the world as a new person, because after that bout of my mental health illness, then that was really what's made me feel so confident now and really helped me through. And The Loneliest Girl in the Universe was really what helped me through that, which is really nice. And it's also such a page turner and such a thrilling book. I love it. It's described as a romantic thriller set in space, and Lauren is my favourite author. I love her to pieces. I absolutely adore this book, and I predict that it's going to be massive. The next book I want to talk to you about is Shaman of Stoneward by Kit Berry. I've talked about this book series a lot on my channel. It is my favourite book series of all time, and this is the final book in the series. It's book 5 of 5. I read this, I can't remember what year it was now. Let me have a look when this was first published. It was first published in 2012, so 5 years ago now, and oh my gosh, I can just remember the feeling of reading the last chapter and crying my eyes out. To put it lightly, this is the best book in my life, and I can't read it now because I just know that as soon as I read the opening I'll cry, because it brings back so many memories. It's one of those books that I only need to read a page and I start crying again because there are so many memories attached to it. I got this in 2012 and it was published on the Thursday, as most books are in the UK, and my Amazon order was telling me that it wasn't going to arrive until the Friday, and I was not going to have that. So my parents surprised me by ordering it from Waterstones, and they picked it up, and it arrived on the Tuesday, and my dad brought it home and he said, "I've got a present for you," and I was thinking, what is it? And I got it, and I cried just on seeing the book, just holding it in my hands and knowing it was a real thing, because these books mean so much to me. They've been such an important part of my life and such an important part of me growing up, and I owe so much to them in my writing and just everything really. The person I am now, a lot of it I owe to this book series. And so I got to the last page and I could feel myself heating up. That moment where you just know that you're gonna burst into tears. The next day, all I could think about was this book. It was like I was in mourning. I physically ached at the feeling of having the series ended and not being able to read them anymore, not being able to have a new book, because I can reread them as many times as I want, but I'm never gonna have that experience of reading them for the first time again. And that is so emotional. I describe these books as my version of Harry Potter. You know how everyone grew up with Harry Potter and they find them so important in their lives? Well, my version of that is Stoneward. I just have so many fond memories of reading them, and they were such a staple part of my adolescence. I love this book with all my heart. And then the next book is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This isn't the original book I read. This is the lovely vintage classics version that I own. The memory I have most attached to this book is reading it on a cold November night when it was raining like crazy. It was really dark, really miserable weather outside, and I spent so long. I think I read this in 2 days, and I just spent the whole 2 days reading this book. I was staying up all night to read it. And I think that's really nice because I think for me, the atmosphere of this book and those memories are what I most associate with it, because it's such a dark, gloomy book that reading it when it was dark and gloomy really added to that experience. And also, I think the best thing, not something that I realised at the time, but reading it late at night I think is one of those really nice experiences, because a lot of the Brontes wrote their books at night, and they would spend whole nights circling around their table talking about their books and writing them. And so you share that experience with Emily hundreds of years later, you know, nearly 200 years after she was born, and so many people experience reading this book new every single year, which is really nice. This was another one of those books where I wouldn't talk to anyone. I got really grumpy as I was reading it because I just wanted to finish it, and I think it's hard not to. The characters are so wild and uncivilized that you can't help but feeling wild and uncivilized as you read it, because you kind of pick up on their traits. And it's so creepy, and it's one of my favourite books ever. I love it, and sharing in that experience with the book, it did make it a very sensory experience too, as the gloominess of Wuthering Heights, as the rain falls on the moors and then you can hear the wind bashing against your window as you read it. That was my favourite thing about reading it. I think the best way to read Wuthering Heights is to throw yourself into it completely, because that's what I did. And every time I reread it now, I'm going to reread it in November or in the winter when I know that I can get that experience from it. And then the final two books I want to talk to you about are kind of bittersweet for me, and they are Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater and Finding Sky by Joss Sterling. I read these books when I was 12, and it is more about the feelings that they bring back when I read them. Not when I read them, but just thinking about where I was when I read these. And actually, I don't know if I'd be sat in front of this camera talking to you today if I hadn't read these two books, because they came at a time when I was 12 and I was reading them as my granddad was in hospital and he was really ill, and he, you know, didn't make it out of hospital. And in those months as he was ill and after his death, books were really what pulled me out of such a difficult time, and I'm feeling really emotional talking about it because I fell into such a difficult place. Again, I wouldn't leave the house. I found it really difficult to do anything, and it was such a hard time for me as I came to terms with the fact that he was no longer with us. And for me, books are what helped me through that time, and these two books in particular were the ones that were really special to me, and I used to take them into the hospital and read them in the car there. And the Shiver series in particular were the ones that I most associate with that time, because the characters in there and the beautiful setting and Maggie Stiefvater's words they meant so much to me at that time, and they gave me so many feelings when I didn't think I would be able to feel again anything but grief and so much sadness. Out of reading so many books and only being able to read in this time, those books that I read were what made me start my book blog, and I think the first review I ever wrote was of Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater, and in writing those reviews I'm sat in front of this camera today and it's completely changed my life. So in some ways I wish that event had never happened. I wish my granddad was still with us, of course, but without reading those books and without going through those emotions in that time, I wouldn't be sat here now talking to you, and I wouldn't have had these amazing things happen to me. So it is very bittersweet, but I have to owe a lot to these books and the books that helped me deal with these. These are the most memorable ones, but I also owe a lot to Kara Stainton's books and Louisa Player's books and so many other people's books that I read at that time and just helped me so much. And that is the healing power of books and how important books are to me, that they help me through so much. From these books right at the start to Lauren James's books most recently, and so many others that just helped me through so many difficult times. And I have so many emotions attached to them. Sadness attached to these, and laughter attached to Freshers, and Lauren's books helped me escape, and Shaman of Stonewald filled me with so many happy tears. I'd shared so many happy memories with the books, and I think that books are just so magical in that sense that they make you feel so many things, not just the characters' emotions but your own emotions attached to them too. So I'd love it if you could share your favourite bookish memories with me in the comments. I'm sure you've got loads that you can tell me about, because like I said, we attach so many emotions and memories to books, and I'd love to know your favourites. So thank you so much for watching this video. I'll let you know where you can find out all the details for Freshers and you can buy it, as well as Chicken House's and Lucy Iverson's social media. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I will see you guys soon. Happy reading!